interesting. And so my next question goes to Artona and Tobias. Is a blockchain a disruptor to the existing financial industries? Is this the opportunity or threat to banking and credit card industries? How does OCBC and MasterCard respond to the blockchain innovation? Let us share the effort by OCBC and MasterCard how to adapt blockchain technology to improve your business or customer experience.
Well, I think the first thing to really recognize is that I don't really see that blockchain is a huge disruption. It's actually in many ways complementary to existing networks and infrastructure. And I think we talked a little bit about trust. And that's really, I think, the use case that we see to be the strongest. How do we create trust? And we have established that trust is so strong on blockchain that you can have cryptocurrencies emerge in different ICOs, and I know a lot of the things. But I also would separate a little bit of the two aspects. There's the cryptocurrency component, and then there is the component of blockchain infrastructure, and how do you create trust? And I think it's really important to not confound them too much. Now, when we look at blockchain specifically and look at trust, the supplementary nature of it really is the ability to say, like, what are the use cases that are ultimately trust efficient? Is it a cross-border transaction? Is it actually maybe title rights to a property? All of these aspects that may be disputed more in a normal environment today, those create then opportunities for blockchain. The interesting part is that at that point it can also become then interoperable to existing networks. So when we think about Singapore, for example, where you have real-time payment infrastructure already in place, things like VocaLink that can provide some of these capabilities, how do you then connect that to, let's say, a cross-border use case where trust is deficient? So you have trusted environments and untrusted environments and make them more interoperable. And I think that's where we see a lot of the opportunity within MasterCard to really work together with startups, work together with banking institutions, work together with government, and doing a lot of this engineering. We have in our own organization created permission-based blockchain, is our own blockchain to solve for things like transparency, consensus, trust, etc., to make it more suitable for a financial transaction and make the transaction speed more appropriate as well in terms of kind of making sure it can carry the same workload as our traditional network. But those are really infrastructure-related questions. Now on the cryptocurrency piece, and I know a lot of questions are also around cryptocurrency, I think that will be an area in terms of how can you deal with regulation in the long run? How do you create this, how do you able to be more accepted within a regulatory environment and to make it easier for banks, businesses to actually engage with them. And I think that's going to be a big challenge for the environment and the community.
Yeah, so I think I can only see opportunities, right, as a bank and as an individual, right? But I think the more interesting question is it really a hype or a fad, right? Or is it going to disrupt the whole industry? I've never been a consultant in my life before, you can check my LinkedIn, but the answer, it depends, right? Blockchain, I always see it like what Tobias has already shared, is that it's wider, right? So you can put the use case of cryptocurrency, right? That's underlyingly still blockchain, right? Or even you want to make it even bigger, you call it distributed ledger, basically. I think it is important for us to make that distinction. Why? Because the use case for each one is very different. If you talk about internet, I know the parallelism between distributed ledger and internet, sometimes people don't really like it. But if you just imagine it for a while, right? The start of internet, right? There's been many times that people tried to use internet for other things as well, right? So in reality, it will be the same. People try with cryptocurrencies, people try with ICOs and all that. I think some will fade, to be very honest, right? In my opinion, some will continue to exist, obviously, right? When the use case is right, when the use case is compelling enough for a sufficient number of people and users to want to use it, it will thrive, right? But when it is not, some people are just trying it out and they will learn and then they will move on, right? But the underlying technology behind it, which is blockchain, infrastructurally, right? It is, I think, significantly very important for anyone, not just banks, not just MasterCard, not just a startup, a Kyber and all that, but for everybody, right? But it can only happen when everybody is in sync and agree that they want to do this together, right? I know there's been a bit more development in terms of interoperable blockchain, right? Still early days, but it shows promise, right? When that happens, you can think about, imagine your light bulb. When they pay electricity, it's not the owner of the premise that needs to pay it themselves, right? But the light bulb can pay it themselves, right? Meaning, there's cryptocurrency embedded inside those light bulbs, right? And based on usage, the light bulbs can pay for it, right? So I think these are very far vision that people might have and people might buy into the story, right? Personally, I really believe in it, right? But it will take time. As you know, for me, it's always about the people, right? Technology can be there, be it AI, be it blockchain. I'm sure a lot of you are startup founders, right? You know that if the technology is good, that's one thing, but people must use it, then that's where you can make your money, and that's where you can create value, right? So in the same way, blockchain is the same, right? It can be a hype and a fad, whereby if you just keep on building ICOs, you can keep on building cryptocurrencies, right? And if the use case is not right, it can be a fad. But the underlying technology, blockchain in itself, I really believe that it can be, there'll be a chance for us to use it in a great way.
Thank you very much, Tobias and Altona. And what are the challenges for the blockchain to be used commonly in the future? This question is go to all of you. What is the challenge for the blockchain in the near future to be used more commonly among the people?
Well, I think that the challenge, and I think again, question also from the audience, is around things like privacy. Is it always appropriate to actually have a technology that creates open, transparent, and have some considerations around privacy? So the right to be forgotten is a key regulation in Europe. Now, if you build a business around blockchain where you use personal identifiable information or anything that could ultimately be associated with an individual, how would you deal with the fact that there is a right to be forgotten in some markets, and how do you actually build the technology so you could remove it? And blockchain is not the easiest to actually remove information, mainly because that's actually its strength. That's how it creates trust. So I think these are going to be really tough challenges to think about in terms of how do you manage privacy, how do you manage transparency, how do you manage even activity on it in terms of pseudonyms versus actually identity. But then the weakest point when you think about some of the things that have happened is always the application layer above the blockchain. So nobody really can hack the blockchain today, but because we're trying to make the keys easier and the transparent, like it's different things, less transparent, and we build application layers on top, and then they become weak spots also from a technology depth standpoint. So these are all things to really think about when you engage with blockchain, and I think goes back to making sure that you have a proper use case. I cannot emphasize that enough, because you can keep building technology, and I do that as a living with my team as well. But if you don't scale, or if you don't have the acceptance of a regulated ecosystem, or the consumer, or the government, I think you will be in a very tough position long term to really get your return.
I've mentioned a little bit in terms of stakeholders, right? How important is it in any blockchain project to have the right stakeholders in place? Because everybody needs to participate in it, and everybody needs to agree on it. And maybe today I just kind of like want to share a little bit in terms of use case, right? The biggest challenge is finding the right use case, right? Because people might say, okay, banking, or even in MasterCard and all that, payments, right? Definitely is the right use case, or trade finance, or KYC, right? These are things that we as a bank have participated and done it and seen it, that technologically it works, right? But I think in terms of use case, the challenge is today we have an existing architecture, right? And this architecture is definitely not suitable for a blockchain-based application to be put in place. If you really want to use blockchain, you literally got to remove the existing architecture and place it into a new one. And this poses a significant challenge when it comes to regulated entities in general, right? And hence, I think new players that can come in and kind of like prove the point that this new platform or network can be a lot more robust, can be a lot more advanced than the current system, right? But they themselves will face a different challenge, right? The challenge of garnering user base, right? Or garnering trust from the How many of you seen a blockchain demo? Can I see a show of hands? I can tell you it's the most uninteresting demo you've ever seen. Because everything happens in the background. So how do you sell something to people that you can't even impress them? Only the engineers behind the scene will be impressed because, oh yeah, really is syncing with each other, you know? And they get excited, right? Yeah, I know because I have a couple of those guys in my shop and they can get really excited. Then I was like, okay, that's it? Okay, great. Just tell to the guys that we have done it, right? So I think use case is very important. Again, just to echo it, and the stakeholders must also believe in it, basically, right? And how do you sell it? I think that's one of the key challenges for me.
Yeah, so I think I share the same comment regarding the challenges in existing blockchain and cryptocurrency ecosystem. And I guess part of the reason is that we are still in the early days, so all the infrastructure is not ready yet. If you look at public cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Ethereum, in the last 4 or 5 years, people have been debating about what is the best scalability solution, and I think until now people haven't found the good one yet. And apart from that, people are so focusing on solving building the infrastructure and not focusing on building the consumer facing application. So that's why the adoption is still only within I guess a few millions of active crypto users in the entire world, and not people like mainstream people on the street, they don't even know what is Bitcoin, what is Ether, and what is cryptocurrency.